Hello edutainment viewers, and welcome to my video on some topics from evolution I want to touch on to help you guys become more active in the classroom. To start, evolution is hard to define in one sentence, though me personally, I would define it as the very long process that every organism inevitably follows as long as they live. Why is it an unavoidable, you may ask? Because with each new generation, genetic material is exchanged among mates. Let's say like genetic material like from here, from there, makes the offspring, which is, it can be any one of these. Now, in an organism's lifetime, it doesn't necessarily have to be the offsprings, it can also be the parents, and it can also, anyway, I'll talk about it first. Anyway, so in an organism's lifetime, it will develop mutations in its genetic code. That's inevitable. The mutations may manifest physically, like a macroscopic level, in the same lifetime if the mutation is drastic, like if it changes a stop codon or then it makes a tumor, then of course you'll see that. Actually, you'll see that in very little time. So if the change is benign, nothing may happen. The only thing is that these mutations, they only have an effect on the overall genetic pool if they affect the sex cells. Now, if somatic cells suffer mutation, it's not added to the glorious melting pot that is the human gene pool as a result of this fact. Somatic cells like skin cells, and they're every other cell in your body. There aren't egg or sperm cells, and those are the sex cells. Genetic material is not only exchanged when conceiving children, it can also be exchanged when you're infected by a DNA virus, which basically the virus, it infects your cells one by one, and it replaces like parts of your genome. Like, let's say this is like a normal genome. It replaces a part of your genome, like let's say it replaces this section here, with its own, and here's the virus's genome. And it grabs that same section and it incorporates it into an equal part of its DNA, so you're exchanging DNA with a virus. Now here's a fun fact about this. There's a theory, though I'm sure it's already been confirmed though. So when mammals are pregnant and they give like the whole placental birth thing, like the whole mechanism of how mammals are born today in the womb, they say that mechanism originally came from viral DNA. Though I don't remember the specifics of it exactly, but it's something interesting that you can look up. Here are some key words and concepts that you should be familiar with. Hybridization, which is a process where two different species of animal that are typically adapted to different ecosystems and are in different parts of the world, they manage to form offspring due to having similar chromosomal structure. Now, a few examples of this could be like a mule, a liger, or a zebra donkey, or a leotig. Sorry, I'm kind of a derp. Anyway, for practical purposes of the test, all hybrid animals are sterile. Now, the next concept is gene flow, which is when one population interacts with another and exchanges genetic material. This we see every day because it's basically, that's the foundation of humanity today, is gene flow. Now that is because you're likely gonna see that you're gonna meet someone who says, oh, I had a grandfather from Norway and a grandmother from maybe, I don't know, Libya or something. And there's a lot of people like that, and there's a lot of different like combinations of like of maybe people you know every day that are the result of gene flow. Sounds a little pragmatic, though it's the truth. Now the next concept is genetic drift, which it's kind of confusing among students, but it's basically the randomness of the occurrence of of an allele in a population, which I guess that could be like maybe, let's say, like genetic drift of like blonde hair in Norway, and like the Scandinavian, like in that region of Europe, the blonde hair is very common. Though, like in countries like Mexico, I know a few blonde Mexicans, though they're few and far in between. And basically, the randomness of the recessive allele, it's controlled by genetic drift. The bottleneck effect, it's when a population partly dies off and the population repopulates itself using fewer individuals, reducing genetic diversity. For example, like let's say this circle here represents a population. Now, to be morbid for a minute, let us assume that this chunk of the population dies off from a new strain of the flu that there's no vaccine. And this chunk over here dies of a civil war. Now, it kind of makes, this is hence the name of bottleneck, because you start like with a large population, though something happens that makes the population suddenly get smaller. Now, that's genetic, that's the bottleneck effect. The founder effect, which is similar to the bottleneck effect, it's different in that it occurs typically within even smaller populations. And then with the founder effect, the populations, they're already small to begin with. They didn't really start large and then they went slightly smaller. They call it the founder effect because like the Amish originally came from the general population, which was large, though very few of them went to the villages. So nowadays, the Amish, they're dominated by this genetic disorder called polydactyly, which is when they're born with extra fingers and toes. And that is a result of that's an example of genetic drift, basically genetic drift being thrown out the window, because as those isolated populations keep breeding, then basically the randomness of the occurrence of the extra toes, extra fingers, the randomness after a given amount of time will just be a notion of the past, and they'll probably, most if not all of the babies eventually will be born with extra fingers and toes. Now, speciation is another concept and another word. It's when a group of species of animal follows a specific evolutionary path separate from the general population and forms its own species after generations of exchanging genetic material amongst themselves without gene flow from the main group. Prezygotic barriers are obstacles that may prevent two potential mates from mating. These can include the habitat of two creatures, the chromosomal structure of their gametes, the season of the year, the behavior of the creatures, and maybe it can even boil down to the physical mechanics of sexual contact, which can be like the shape of their genitalia. Postzygotic barriers, they're obstacles that prevent the offspring that do manage to get past the prezygotic barriers from surviving to the day that it can have its own offspring. Now, an example of this is what I just mentioned earlier, that most hybrids are sterile. And there's other examples, like maybe like natural selection, like maybe the hybrid is born weak and unfit to defend itself in the wild. Now, the barriers that I mentioned earlier, they have a problem because they rely too much on natural selection and they don't fully account for artificial selection by humans. I hope you liked my video. Like and subscribe to show your love for a YouTube rookie.